What's up, YouTube? This is Big Mike. This is a response to 93 Sports News' video regarding an article that came out recently where George Gervin in an interview acknowledged that it was Michael Jordan who pretty much convinced him that it was time for him to retire. And I'll put a link to 93 Sports News video in my description box. I just had to do a video, man. It's like, this is like one of those topics where you don't want to just do a video talking about it because it's so random and like, why is Michael doing a video about it? But, because you brought it up, because it's a lot of stuff that happened which kind of explains why Michael acted the way he did, but still, as great a player as George Gervin is, you wonder like why Mike was reacting like that. Very mean, whatever, right? Apparently it had a lot to do with two things in my mind why he treated George Gervin that way. Number one, I think in most people's mind, Jordan and many other people felt that there was a freeze out in Jordan's All-Star game, the first one he played in 1985. Apparently a lot of players, a lot of established stars at the time, resented the media attention and the accolades that Michael had received coming into that season. But really throughout the season, because like I said, when he was drafted, he was expected to be, maybe a Jerry Stackhouse type player, 20 points per game, a valuable asset, but not a franchise player. And he proved everybody wrong. And he just got stronger and stronger throughout the season. And by the All-Star break, or near the All-Star break, Jordan was balling. I mean, he was putting up 33, 35, 40, 37. I mean, he was doing shit that rookies don't usually do. But a lot of those established stars resented it. And I remember reading that supposedly players like George Gervin and Isaiah Thomas and maybe some others supposedly froze Jordan out. They tried to keep the ball out of his hands during the actual game. And also supposedly the Eastern All-Stars, some of them, when Jordan was going against Gervin, they were saying that they wouldn't help out on defense. Like they was trying to make Jordan look embarrassed. Like they was hoping that Gervin would embarrass Jordan on defense and make him look bad. Because his first year in the league, Jordan was probably at that time still maybe an average defender. I wouldn't say he was a bad defender at his first year, but he was probably average. But he worked his way into becoming one of the best defenders in NBA history in his prime. Even when he came back, after the first retirement, he was still a top 10 to 20 defender in the league. But that was one of the motivations why Jordan was the way he was. Like, at that time, the media didn't quite know Michael outside of his persona. And when that trade was announced just before the season started, because if I'm not mistaken, the Bulls got George Gervin to replace Quentin Daly in the lineup. Quentin Daly was having his drug issues. So to fill that position, George Gervin was traded to the Bulls. And obviously, with that having happened, Jordan wasn't happy about that trade. That's why he was so, when asked about it, he was, like curt, like something about like, well, I'll just say I'm not happy about it or something like that. And that didn't sound like the Jordan that was the media darling at the time. And he resented, George Gervin. George Gervin has maintained that he wasn't part of any freeze out, and he'll say, well, Jordan got 20-something points, so how do we freeze him out? Things like that. although it's kind of acknowledged that there was some truth to it, but how true it was, it's still left to be determined by whoever's looking into it and trying to investigate it. But also another reason why I think Jordan treated George Gervin that way is because he didn't like the feeling at the time. And this is why I try to tell younger people how the NBA was so different then. George Gervin was seen like George Gervin was a great scorer who never won anything, right? With the Spurs. Of course, in the ABA, then in the NBA, the Spurs used to be in the Eastern Conference. San Antonio used to be in the Eastern Conference. Then I think in the early 80s, they switched to the Western Conference, but they're never able to get past the Lakers or whoever. They were just, the Lakers, or they weren't able to get past the Bullets, or I'm trying to think of other teams they played in the 70s in the playoffs. But they never could get past the Lakers, even when they got Gilmore. They just couldn't get over the hump. And Gervin had this reputation for being this great individual basketball player, this great scorer who never won anything. And Michael Jordan resented when people called him George Gervin with a smile. He also resented being compared to George Gervin, and, guards, scoring champions can't win titles. George Gervin was representative of that. At the time, George Gervin held the record for most scoring titles by a shooting guard with 4. Ultimately, Jordan would get 10. Allen Iverson would get 4 himself. But he resented this, the comparisons to Gervin. So you have this right in your face. This is a guy who people compare you to, and people say, well, Michael Jordan never going to win a championship because scoring champions don't win titles. You have to have a big man. And Jordan was ultimately the player that helped to change that perception of perimeter players to the point now where teams build around what? Perimeter players. But these are some of the reasons why Michael Jordan treated George Gervin the way he did. I don't think it was. In hindsight, maybe he shouldn't have did this. George Gervin was a legendary player who's at the end of his career. One of the reasons why he left the Spurs was because of the emergence of Alvin Robertson, and George Gervin knew he was at the end of his rope. As far as being a top basketball player, I looked at that article, and I didn't really find anything wrong with what Gervin said. He said that he's not convinced that Michael's the greatest player of all time. He said there's other guys that are up there, Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I totally understand that. You know what I'm saying? I get that. These things are open to debate, and these are just subjective opinions. But yeah, this is pretty much, to me, this is pretty much primarily the main reasons why I think Michael Jordan treated George Gervin the way that he did during his short tenure with the Bulls. Michael Jordan was young. He was trying to establish himself as one of the great players of all time. And with everything I just stated, he probably also saw George Gervin as just another body in his way in his pursuit of being a great individual basketball player. Probably similar to other situations like Kobe. Kobe, when he played with Shaq, who was actually in his prime, he was not comfortable being just a sidekick to Shaq. He wanted to lead the show. He wanted to be the established star. And with that competitive drive, and I think Gervin even alluded to this in the interview, players like Michael and Kobe and Bill Russell, and I think Will Chamberlain had this too, even though people don't really pick up on it, they all have this drive to be the best or be perceived as the best, and they don't like to have anything they don't want anything taken away from that, and that's just my thoughts on that. Tell me what you guys think.